Board of Directors of the Foundation for Excellence. I want to again welcome you and thank you all for taking time out of your busy schedule, things being what they are, to be with us. Your time is greatly appreciated. Today is Monday, September 14th of 2020. It is 2:05 p.m. by my watch, and I'm officially calling this meeting to order. As I peruse our agenda today, the first item is the approval of the minutes. We met last time on April 27th, 2020. Minutes were provided to you prior to the meeting via email in your packet. I am looking for a motion for their approval.
So moved.
Thank you, Director. Sounds like Washington.
Yep. Forward. David Anderson here.
Thank you, Mayor. Is there any discussion?
Yes,
corrections.
I see a mistake.
Yes, please let us know, Director Lomberg.
In the director comments section, it looks like Director Hoffman is referred to by the wrong name as a Director Stafford, who I believe does not exist. So that would be good to fix.
Directors Hess and Stafford, I see that there.
So it's in there twice.
Huh.
A little bit lower when she spoke.
Thank you.
Yep.
That's my error. When I use the voice recognition software, it doesn't always understand my voice.
Duly noted. Thank you, Attorney Robinson. Seeing that there is no further discussion, I'm calling for a vote to accept the annual minutes of our April 27th, 2020 meeting, provided that the aforementioned changes are made. All in favor, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you all. Reports and communications.
Madam President, I can start on C1 as staff report, and with just a moment of patience, I will switch to our PowerPoint today.
Thank you. Please do.
And it looks like that is coming up just fine on the screen there. I'll start with welcoming guests. We have Dorla Bonner, Director of Diversity, Equity, Inclusion with the City of Kalamazoo, who's been invited to introduce herself and briefly introduce her work. And then this is in the context of the work that we would do together as a board, which was discussed at the winter work session and then again at the April board meeting together in the area of her focus with the city. And then Chris Sargent, who's here as well, to co-present some of the items of COVID response that the city and United Way of the Battle Creek and Kalamazoo region have undertaken together. So with that, I see Director Bonner was on camera. I can gladly hand it over to you and introduce you to the Foundation for Excellence Board of Directors. Welcome.
Thank you, Steve, and to you all. It's such a pleasure to be here and to share what's happening in my new world as Director of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion, and how we are going to work together in the future. Just a little bit about the office. In a nutshell, the goal of the DEI, Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion, is to help the city become an anti-racist organization. A loaded goal, a goal that's going to take us some time, but it's such an honor to be a part of the journey. This is both inward facing, how we work together as an organization between departments, and outward facing, how our programs affect the community. And that outward facing is where the work of FFE comes to play. One of the things that we found that I've learned, that I know that we're not unusual, is that most of our programs, other than our federally funded programs and the public safety, we don't collect data on who we serve. So it's hard to know if we're doing better if we don't know where we are. So our first order of business is to start collecting data around demographics, income. We're still working on what kind of data we'll collect, But the goal is to, with your next funding stream, is we're working with Steve and some other departments, like Shared Prosperity Kalamazoo, to actually start collecting data this next go round, so we can have a starting point. Working with with IT as well, and Karen Conley, who is our data guru, we call her, just to learn how to do that, how to make it effective, what we need to collect, how do we encourage, not encourage, but how do we require the folks we fund to collect it. We want to make sure that we are serving our community in an equitable and inclusive way. We want to make sure we even advertise it right to make sure we're hitting the right populations. We know what we intend to do, but right now we have no proof that we're really meeting the goals of our intention. And so that's my connection with you all, as well as other things along the lines of training. We're going through some training with Erase for all of our staff. We would want to include you in there. One of the other large projects of our office is an equity assessment. Of our organization, we've never looked at ourselves in a holistic way, like where are we internally around equity? And that includes our citizen committees, commissions, boards. We want to know how you feel about what we're doing and what's happening with you. So you'll hear more about that as we go along. But in a nutshell, that's where we are. That's where you're included. And I'm really looking forward to working with you to make sure that we're hitting the mark, that we're doing what we mean to do. And thanks, Steve. That's my story. Appreciate you.
Thank you so much, Doyle. It's been great to work with you since you came over to the city manager's office in, we call them this January, February, right around January. February. And you've been with the city for 10 years.
10 years. Yep.
Okay. Do any board members have questions about for Dorla, or generally for the work, or generally I think what we're aiming for the next couple board meetings to have some collaboration taking place. But any specific questions anyone has?
Hi, Dorla. This is Charlene Taylor. I look forward to working with you.
Looking forward to it as well.
That was just my question. I think, Steve, you've already answered it, is as you're beginning to gather the information so that we have a baseline information on the demographics of the individuals who are being serviced by the city, and we're able to, take a more of a deep dive. Will those results be trickled to us as part of the FFE board? Will we be able to just partner with you and understand what it is that you are accomplishing, and help you celebrate your wins, but also provide you support through your challenges? I just want to avail myself. Certainly I have had conversations with members of this board who feel very similarly. But I guess my question is will we be able to have that real-time info or high-level statistics, or how are you looking to share and provide information?
It depends. If it would depend on how do you want it. I mean, we are evolving. We are developing something that's never happened before, and so it would be based on what you want. Because it's your funding, your work. You need both high level and deep dive. It's just so important that we really know who we're serving and how. And the only way we can do that is continue conversation amongst each other. And so a lot of it would depend on, how it evolves, how you want to hear it, and how often you want to hear it. I will give it to you as many ways and as often as you ask me to give it to you.
Yeah. Well, thank you. I don't want to be really prescriptive at all. I just want to, again, avail myself. I've had conversations offline with many board members about your work. We're excited again to support you. I would dare say the entirety of this board is behind you. But I don't, as the process is evolving, I don't want our support to be a barrier to you and being too prescriptive. So I just wanted to make sure you realize that we support, and we would like updates and information. I particularly would, but I want it to be in a way that's fluid and organic and that supports the work and not becomes an additional task to undermine what it is that you're trying to accomplish. That's just my
And I appreciate that because data can become cumbersome, reporting can become cumbersome and an enemy of the work actually. And I do understand it. Having spent many years working for HUD and government programs, I get it. But so I think our continued conversation at this end, at the early end, is what's going to set the stage. And you know, I'm not a shy person, so if it gets overwhelming, I will let you know that that's not working for me. So you know that I will be honest about, good idea, doc, but it ain't happening, so.
And please do, please continue with your transparency and your candor. I think that is so charming about you, and we all know where we stand and we know where you stand. So
Yes,
I just want to encourage that.
I appreciate, I really appreciate knowing that I have your support. That is good to know.
Absolutely. Director Hamilton, were you about to jump in? Okay. I thought you were trying to get our attention.
Can I jump in here real quick? This is Jim Ritzma.
Absolutely.
I want to echo what's been said, with Dorla coming on board in February. Obviously, during the last 6-7 months, it's been quite a whirlwind. And I appreciate having Dorla on board in this role. And she has really stepped into this work. So she has my full support, and obviously the rest of the city manager and administration support going forward. So we definitely look forward to doing this work together, as this is a partnership between the city and the Foundation for Excellence.
I love that. Thank you, Director Ritzema. Anyone else?
Yeah.
Yes, Director Urban, please.
I would just add that that endorsement of support extends to the electeds, the commissioners, and the mayor, if I may speak for them. I detect some real enthusiasm for what Dorla is doing amongst us.
Here. Thank you, Jack.
Thank you.
That's great to hear. Thank you for being here with us, Director Bonner. Her presence today grew from a conversation she and I had not long ago, and I appreciate your taking the time to be with us and keep us informed, and just so that we can show our gratitude and support for you today.
Thank you.
Turn it back to you, Steve.
Thanks so much. Director Bonner, thank you again for joining us, and feel free to stay on. The agenda will just keep moving through on the screen, and hopefully it'll be a meeting you can enjoy. So moving on to our next guest, Chris Sargent, who I believe many of you may know. I think, Chris, I think you can hear me from before, maybe a brief introduction, and then I've got these four items, which I'll bring up on screen for our COVID response that I'll be looking to cover, and two of them, of course, we can talk together on. So if you want to just briefly introduce yourself to the board.
Yeah, Steve, you mentioned a lot of people know me. So when you say brief, they're all like, yeah, whatever. That's not Chris's style, but I'll do my best. So as CEO of United Way of the Battle Creek and Kalamazoo region, a role that I've had for almost 4 years now, and actually been working in the region for over 16 with United Way. My family and I live here. This community is home to us. And so I always say, when people say, what's work-life balance? I say it's one and the same for me. So who I am personally is who I am professionally, and appreciate the opportunity to come and share a few words with you all today.
Thanks, Chris. And hold tight. I've got a couple items, and then I'll bring you back in around the Disaster Relief Fund. Sound good?
Sounds great.
Thanks so much. Okay, directors. Well, what we wanted to do today was follow previous year formats of, as we lead up to discussing the draft budget that's being proposed for 2021, do a recap of 2020. And a couple main decisions were made here. One is COVID-19 response was such a big part of what happened this year. And COVID-19 had such a big impact on programs being delivered that we wanted to make that a focus of how we presented. So with that, you're going to see the special projects that we were able to do in partnership with other major institutions in the community. You'll also see follow-up on programs that were affected, our existing programs that were affected by COVID-19. And then at the end, we'll show, we've decided to split basically presentation into 2 board meetings. So affordable housing will be covered in October, partially for timing and also because Director Hoffman, who I promise I'm not putting on the spot, was very interested in doing kind of a landscape presentation of that sector to the board, which pairs beautifully with DCM Lamb, who I'm also not putting on the spot, to talk about 2020 and 2021 programs. So we'll have you could say a theme focus of the October 12th meeting, which will be affordable housing. So with that in mind, of course, we're prepared to answer any questions that you have. So feel free to bring them my way as we present. I'd like to start on with an overview of COVID-19 response, which is a timeline of approval and requests, and then the total. As you can see, we started in March with the Disaster Relief Fund. We had approval for that from City Commission on March 16th, and that was to really add significant resources to the existing Disaster Relief Fund partnership between United Way and the city, and we'll speak more to that in just a moment. The Business Loan Fund, which has been presented already, and many of you are aware of, was approved by City Commission on the 31st, and that was a $2 million grant to United Way, which we'll talk about more in just a moment. Digital Access for All, I'll speak to first on the next slide, and then the Learning Hub support, which is a current new request that's going before City Commission in September. So you can see the total possible response of the city with FFE support has been or would be about $2.6 million in the 2020 fiscal year. So pretty significant and I'd say quick response on our part that we should take note of. So skipping to the next slide, Digital Access for All was the program brought together with the Promise, Kalamazoo Public Schools, Kalamazoo Public Library, and involving the Kalamazoo Community Foundation, which sought to address the highlighted but long existing aspect of what's called the digital divide, which was that many people at home don't have access to internet, or they don't have the same access to internet. That was, of course, made much, much worse because of COVID-19, because we had this sudden need to continue an existing school year and then to also look to a coming school year for at-home learning. And so after significant research and a series of meetings over about a 2-month period, we were able to determine that we could purchase 1,000 Wi-Fi hotspots with high quality, unlimited access, and lend those through Kalamazoo Public Library as a core partner to learners in the community, excuse me, who had been identified by Kalamazoo Public Schools as lacking internet at home and most in need of that connection. And those are hardened Wi-Fi hotspots that come inside of a waterproof carrying case. And those are lent by Kalamazoo Public Library to students of KPS. And they have to date lent out, I believe the number today would be just about 450 hotspots, and they're moving about 30 per day, including in partnership with community and schools, driving those in some cases to families that aren't able to make the pickup. There's been very few technical issues or concerns that have been shared through the hotline with KPL and KPS. Dr. Rita, the superintendent at Ratchaburi, has been a very vocal supporter, come out very strongly in support of this program. And it's really made this school year, helped make this school year as difficult and challenging as I know it is and continues to be for many parents, just a little bit better and a little bit more possible for students to learn. So the lending continues, and the intent is at the end of that period, once kind of the need has been potentially met with those 1,000, to reassess what needs exist or what opportunities exist with any units that remain not directly in use. One interesting thing is just making sure that everyone who might have a need for those for the potentials that are opened up by internet in the home are aware that that potential is in their house with their KPS learner. So that's kind of the holistic view of being able to make sure, you know, if you're looking for work, if you're seeking different benefits and supports, that you're aware that that bandwidth is in the house. I'll also, completely unrelated to FFE, but a worthy shout out, because this has been highlighted by some of the partners, is that Interfaith Homes is currently bringing online a long worked on program of providing internet to its residents. And I know that the Lift Foundation has been really crucial in that work. And it's come up as just a terrific model because it's been a location of great need for internet equity for quite a long time. So that's a shout out to Mayor Anderson, Director Anderson, for the compliments that is receiving already. And that really, again, it just shows that oftentimes many hands make light work or lighter work in instances of community-wide need that's as complicated as something like providing technical support to families. I'll move on to a related item, which is being called Learning Hubs. And this is pending. It's a current request that we are taking to City Commission for approval, because it would be a reallocation of existing allocated funds from this fiscal year. So this is an FYI to the board, essentially. We're requesting a $125,000 grant to Kalamazoo Youth Development Network. What they've done is they have worked with KPS to identify the subset of KPS's equity cohorts that even with internet provision still would not have the best learning experience because of either housing instability or because of a lack of access to a positive all-day learning environment at home. And so they are considering 4 or 5 locations that would welcome approximately 40 learners from 8 a.m. to 3 p.m. on school days, provide the normal nutrition and other supports, including in some cases transportation for those learners. And really, again, join in the goal of trying to make sure that we're serving our community in the way that we certainly hope we were pre-COVID. What's interesting with this work in particular is that Kalamazoo Youth Development Network is able to leverage its cohort of out-of-school time organizations, which number about 60, and one of those is Parks and Recreation Department of the city, to support this project with staff, but also to kind of leverage each one of these organizations to offer targeted, smaller scale, similar programs to people and families and youth in their service area or their service area of expertise. So again, this is really the community joining together in a lot of very creative ways, quickly, and with, you know, best practices in mind to help solve this challenge of COVID-19. The Learning Hubs model is being taken from, or adapted, I should say, from, I believe, Cleveland and San Francisco. And for those who are interested in more details, we have Meg Blinkevich, who's the executive director of KidNet. She'll be co-presenting and speaking to this item at the City Commission meeting on September 21st, once the agenda is approved, and just, of course, granting that item makes the agenda. So we see this as a kind of an enhancement or a supercharging of the Digital Access for All program. An interesting note, and again on the budget side, is, and we'll touch on this briefly when we talk about Parks and Rec's 2020 programming, is the Parks and Recreation summer youth programs, which are called Super Rec and All Things Possible. Those were limited to 50% capacity when all was said and done. Just space, social distancing, the ability to staff, the ability to make this all happen. 50% was the limit that they came to. And they met that target, and they provided very high quality programming. But what that meant was that the allocation that they received wasn't all used. And so this was an interesting opportunity when KidNet and several other local funders approached us to try and put together a consortium of funding to make this Learning Hubs program work. We said, well, look, here's this money that was meant to help young people for very specific reasons in our community. We weren't able to do that with it this year because of COVID. And then here, meanwhile, there's this new need that's sprung up because of COVID, which is affecting the learning of young people and the social emotional learning and welfare of young people. So it really seemed like a beautiful one-to-one ability to keep those dollars doing really good work in the community. So we're seeking approval for that from the City Commission on 9/21. And again, it goes back to the overall response that has been made possible for the city only by the existence of Foundation for Excellence. So that's $2.6 million plus mobilized for supporting nonprofits, supporting small businesses, supporting minority and women-owned businesses, supporting young people learning, that is made possible this year alone. So I'm happy again. Feel free if anyone wants to jump in with questions. And Chris, we're coming back to you now. So what I'd like to do is pop over to Disaster Relief Fund and show some top level items here. And then Chris, also FYI, I've got the 3 pages of United Way's website up. So I think if just FYI, I can change the screen share. So if you want to dive into like the list of granted businesses or show the bar graph about, sector for nonprofits, I can jump over once we go through these 2 slides, if that's okay.
Sounds good.
Okay. So Disaster Relief Fund started, this was the work of, if I'm not mistaken, Deputy City Manager Lamb and Alyssa Stewart at United Way, who really brought this after the horrendous floods we experienced to life, or at least kind of brought it into the modern version that we know today. And it was ready to accept funding, which is exactly what a disaster relief fund should be, right? Everything's ready. It just needs to be funded whenever the need arises. And so we were able to do that in very short order in March of this year. And the numbers that I'm seeing are, I think the program's closed out. So at this point, what we're seeing is pretty much a final summary of the activities. But we saw 50 organizations helped by DRF. And those top areas were food and housing assistance. And then beyond that were other basic needs. And 18%, so just about 1 in every $5 of DRF came from the city, from the Foundation for Excellence activities. And of course, this was joint work with the Urgent Relief Fund, which is a similar fund managed by the Kalamazoo Community Foundation. So in a sense, the overall, I believe it was $1.7 million of disaster relief fund was leveraged against and with the Urgent Relief Fund. So top level view from just our standpoint. Chris, if you want to jump in and add any details.
Yeah, so I had just a little bit of context, and Steve, if folks have questions, we can always jump over to the website, or if they're curious about it, just look just above my head. I've got it on the banner. I'm a traveling billboard these days, but changethestory.org, you can see some of that greater detail. I would say that one of the things that was really helpful with the support, really a couple of days in after the governor's issuance of the Stay Home, Stay Safe order, was we were able to have immediate scale and capacity on the ground for some of the key areas around basic needs, food, shelter, childcare for essential workers, just to name a few. And as Steve highlighted there, over 50 organizations helped. When you add in the partnership with the Kalamazoo Community Foundation, that list grows to over 70 organizations, many of whom we would all know and rely on to be this responsive. The other thing that I would align this to is we had also actually launched in January, the Kalamazoo Response Consortium. So that's led by Adam Castle at Griffin Place, that also does 211. So we aligned 211 in that group specifically. And what that is that's bringing all the nonprofit community together and some of the public organizations to talk about how do we respond in issues of disaster. We didn't expect a global pandemic to happen 2 months later, but we were really thankful to have that group, because that coordinated and aligned services and support and the ability to scale up programs. So in City of Kalamazoo and we're essential and part of creating that as well. So just want to lift that up, that those things came together. All the organizations that were funded out of the Disaster Relief Fund are asked to submit a report to us this week. And so coming to you probably late October, early November will be kind of a comprehensive report in terms of what are the outcomes and what are the successes that we can highlight with this support. And I also want to mention that I think, it's really important to recognize what sits at the core values of this work. And so whether it's the Disaster Relief Fund or the Small Business Loan Fund that we're going to talk about in just a minute, for United Way, everything that we do is about vision and values. And to segue a little bit in terms of what Dorla said, both from an internal and external perspective, equity is at the heart of this work. So we know, for example, on the Disaster Relief Fund, when we look at the data, communities of color are disproportionately affected during times of disaster, especially like COVID. And so recognizing that, being able to support organizations that are led by and serving people of color is really critical to be able to help those who are most disparate during times of disasters. And so I think it's important to lift up some of those core values like equity, collaboration, and partnership, and those types of things that we would all expect to make sure that the work that we're doing is as impactful as it can be. Those would be just a couple of things I would highlight. Thanks, Steve.
Thank you, Chris. I'm always glad I invited you. I've just got to say.
Steve and I work so well together nights and weekends that, we just come in sync on some of this stuff. So. Yep.
So Kalamazoo Small Business Loan Fund, you teed that up nicely as, again, a partnership with United Way. And that was the $2 million grant made, which we had essentially right-sized with a combination of consultation with Upjohn Institute, local business organizations downtown, including Downtown Kalamazoo, conversations with Southwest Michigan First, with Small Business Center at Western, trying to track data on really a day-to-day basis as things were evolving this spring from MISHDA, from state employment numbers. And the total loan to date is $1.35 million. And so we felt like we sized it pretty correctly, and we certainly didn't leave any capacity kind of out of the grant. 82% of the eligible businesses were funded. And Chris, I know I'll put you on the spot in just a second for the kind of the workings of the grant making committee itself, because that really, I think, is where the rubber hits the road in terms of those relationships that you built. And 55% of the approvals were women and minority owned businesses. And then this also, we should tack onto this conversation, the Kalamazoo Micro Enterprise Grants, which is again an outgrowth of this collaboration. So the work that we did identified other needed work, and so we moved into that scope to make sure that the work was done. So Chris, and again, maybe this is the time to jump over to United Way's website if those specifics are more helpful. So you can go ahead and get started, and I will move my screen share.
Yeah, feel free, Steve. So 2 days after we got the Disaster Relief Fund up and running, Steve is highlighting there, we quickly transitioned kind of late March into a conversation around supporting small business. And I'm sure many of you are maybe kind of surprised at that United Way was the partner, just because United Way historically doesn't necessarily work directly with small business in terms of loans and grants. But in the conversation we had with Steve and Laura and others in this development, what we're really good at, I think, is being able to get resources out quickly in an objective, thoughtful manner. And so whether it's traditionally been grants, in the case of the loan fund, it was something that we felt that we could jump into and utilize our system and our structure to be able to do that. And as Steve mentioned, having folks from the Downtown Kalamazoo Partnership, Small Business Development Center, Antonio from the City of Kalamazoo, James Liggins, Cindy Cole, and we really serve as the committee that reviews all of these requests. Our goal was to be as supportive and as responsive as we could. So some high level criteria: businesses that are 50 FTE or less, $1 million in sales or less a year, asking for $5,000 to $50,000 in loans that were 3 years at 1%. So we tried to keep them really low barrier in terms of being able to not only access the funds, but also in terms of repayment. There was no payments for the first 6 months. So all of these loans that we have distributed, payment is still not started yet. That'll start November 1st. It is important to note, I think this would be helpful for all of you to be aware of, that we have actually put out a survey this week that will ask businesses to recognize that most of the repayment starts November 1st. There are a couple that are December 1st based on when they received their loans, that's coming up, but also asking them how we might be able to support and help them. So I think many of us hoped that COVID was a 1 month, 2 month, 3 month impact to the level that is now 6 months and longer. And so we recognize that some of these businesses, for example, may come back and say an additional time for deferment would be helpful. So that's something that we're going to look towards. I know we've had conversations with the city of Kalamazoo and with Steve at FFE just to consider whether or not some expanded deferment might be helpful since this has become more than a short-term kind of program. So again, we led with our focus around equity and collaboration. Initially, it was short-term. You'll see in the box that Steve has up now kind of our success in terms of being inclusive and supportive of our BIPOC and women-owned businesses in the community. That was helped and enhanced by many of the partners around the table, including representatives from Black Wall Street, putting it out into the community and many other community level partners. We did engage with the city, kind of our grassroots and community networks to really be able to share this information. And I think while we still have loans dollars available, that helps us think about, as we're having discussions with the city of Kalamazoo now about, so what does this look like in the future? Initially, it was designed to be a short-term program. Obviously, we see the need continuing and looking long-term. And then what we did is also, as Steve just pulled up, parlayed this into a grant program. We had $500,000 between the support of the city of Kalamazoo and FFE, along with Consumers Energy Foundation, to do $5,000 grants to 100 businesses. It's important to note here that over 30 of the organizations that qualified for the loans also qualified for this program. And so we just gave them $5,000 forgivable. So we helped 100 businesses in this micro enterprise grant program at $5,000. We also helped 30 plus organizations in the loan program get $5,000 in forgivable. So that impact's been really tremendous in terms of the number of businesses that we could support. And you'll see similarly as we had on the loan fund, some great diversity in terms of the businesses by race and ethnicity and gender, in terms of who we were able to help, as well as the SBK priority neighborhoods. So our focus was on BIPOC and women-owned businesses and SBK priority neighborhoods of Edison, Eastside, and Northside. So we feel pretty good about this. We've learned a lot. In fact, part of the 2021 plan is to, kind of do a larger survey and scale to assess for the small business community what's still missing or what are still the needs, and trying to help align some of the resources out in the community, because there's a lot of different partners in the space, and we don't want small businesses to wonder where they go to get help. So our goal is to try to create some type of a resource that would help them understand where those supports are, as a one-stop shop type of scenario.
Good.
Chris, I'll jump to one last slide in this area, and then I think that's probably, we can do a quick pause to see if any directors have questions in this particular area. I'll also do another shout out to Director Bonner, who at the kind of in the first few months of her position was pretty key in, I think, connecting conversations and making sure that everyone who needed to be at the table was at the table, putting really positive pressure on all the partners in the process to make sure that, what was good was never good enough. And I think helped shaped, along with Antonio Mitchell at Economic Development, who's really your ongoing key partner, Chris, make sure that the program was shaped in a positive way. So huge thanks to everybody involved, both in setting this up, what seems now like 5 years ago, but was just March, April, and May, and everybody who's keeping it going. So let's see, we're two clicks away from going where I would like to go, which is back to the slideshow.
Yeah, as you're doing that, Steve, so the investment's been significant. That is definitely something that at United Way we appreciate, not only the investment, but I think based on the relationship and trust and partnership that we have, I just want to recognize the value of that and how our organizations can come together to support the community.
Thank you, Chris. So to this slide here, which will be the final slide in kind of this business area, is Business Development Fund, which was formerly referred to variously as Economic Opportunity Fund, has been part of the economic vitality work of the city in support of that goal of the Imagine Kalamazoo strategic vision. And we can talk about this more as we see the actual budget numbers later in today's meeting. But I did want to just highlight here that 2020 activities, we saw 18 businesses were provided with technical assistance is to support their kind of core operations and expertise and knowledge that were needed for their businesses to thrive and grow. And then there's 39 small business grants and GAP grants for a total of $640,000 invested in community in that area. Here's a ribbon cutting from, I believe, 2019. So I'll put a little asterisk on my photo show for today because of COVID. Many of the photos we have, you may have seen before. So I'll ask for a little bit of grace. I believe the word was used earlier today about photo presentation. It's hard to take photos of activities during a pandemic. But so with that, I think it's a great time to ask if any directors have questions on any of the topics that we've just covered. Questions, comments, yeah.
I do have a couple questions, Steve. Go ahead, Director Carroll, please.
Oh, that's okay. Go ahead. Okay, thank you. My question, first of all, thank you so much for the wonderful work you're doing. So important. So I have a question about the Disaster Relief Fund. Is there a published list of the fund recipients?
Yeah, so that's on the website that Steve had up briefly. So yeah, Steve, you want to go back to that, list all of the nonprofit partners that we invested in, and the asterisks will identify the organizations that the Kalamazoo Community Foundation invested in. That's why I say it's actually, it's not only over 70, I think it's upwards of 90. So our two community impact teams got together on a every other day basis and made joint decisions about investment. So it was a true partnership in Kalamazoo for all the funding and support that we did there.
Wonderful, thank you.
You're welcome. Let me just highlight too, because I think your question speaks to the value of transparency. So when it comes to Disaster Relief Fund and Small Business Grant Fund, all of those organizations and businesses that were supported are listed on the website. On the Small Business Loan Fund, because those are loans, and for some businesses that's deemed to be proprietary information, we asked all businesses to list their name only, and there were a handful that said no thank you, and we allowed them to opt out. So you see the majority of them listed here, but there were a few that weren't listed, and we just made that decision in partnership early on that said for some businesses, if they don't want to be listed, they are getting loans, and so we need to honor that. So we tried to be fully transparent as much as we could in terms of listing everybody that received support.
Great, thank you.
Madam Chair?
Yes, could we go back to the pie charts on the United Way's website, please, Steve?
Hello.
Can you hear me?
Madam Chair, can you hear Director Hopewell?
Oh, I apologize, I cannot.
I'm sorry. Can
Hello.
you hear me?
Can you hear me now?
Go ahead. Go ahead, Director Hopewell. I apologize.
So thank you, Madam Chair. President Sargent, can you, and I think I may have missed it. So there were some businesses that are not named. Is that correct? That received?
Correct. Yep. I think there's about 8 businesses, Bobby, that weren't listed that asked to opt out of that.
And why would we say yes to that?
So the discussion, I know Steve and I and some others kind of debated this early on. The thought being that because these aren't grants, but they're loans. So it's almost like if somebody were to go and get money from a bank, they wouldn't necessarily list that they're a loan recipient. And so we asked each business to allow us to list them and said our intent is to be as transparent as we can with the resources. But we decided that because they're loans and because some businesses would view that as a proprietary piece of information, we did allow them to opt out. So there's 7 or 8 businesses that chose to opt out that aren't listed here.
So I guess, Mr. Attorney, how does that work with public dollars?
Well, these aren't public dollars. So in terms of taxpayer dollars, these are dollars through the FFE. But remember, we're only a portion of this. We contributed to a bigger pot of money. So this is not really an FFE program. It's just we contribute to this bigger program coordinated through the United Way.
So then using that as a basis for my next question, if they were FFE programming or a program, again, would they be able to be anonymous?
If we were, well, and that's a question, I guess, for the board of directors and the bylaws of the FFE. If it's totally our program, I think that we could insist on, unless you permit us to publicize the loan, you aren't going to get the money.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Well,
Yes, Director Urban.
yeah, I think that I, for one, would like to hear what the reasons are for declining to be listed, because so many other organizations found that wasn't a problem. So what makes these 6 or 8 organizations so special? I'm curious, and I bet you if the public were more aware of what this non-disclosure, I think they'd be a little annoyed knowing what little we know right now.
Chris, building on what you had mentioned earlier, I remember part of the discussion was, to the point of proprietary information, is that in private lending, none of this information would be public. So we're going the pendulum in the exact opposite direction of aiming for maximum transparency. Now, allowing for a business to opt out could be a number of reasons. And the top level reason is that as a lender, we can identify objectively your need, but it's not essentially, again, these are private dollars, not taxpayer dollars. It's a sticky situation with assuming that we know what's best for a business, right? So that's a different level of kind of engagement with the topic that that seemed inappropriate. So for example, were it to be public information that a business had borrowed money, would the public have a different perception of that business? Would they think that business was less stable? Would they cease patronizing that business? So those are business decisions, and that's business information and business intelligence that in some cases I think is entirely the right of the business to know. Whether or not that aligns entirely, if it's, as it's brought up now, again, this was discussed at commission a number of months ago. These exact questions were addressed and answered. Whether or not, members of the public would think that all businesses should be listed is kind of a different topic. But to the point of trying to make sure that we're serving businesses on the terms of their need in a moment of great need, we thought that option was an important one. And Director Urban, I take your point that if so many felt they needed to be listed or could be listed, then why were some not listed? On the flip side of that coin, so few chose not to be listed, right? So that's kind of another way of looking at it.
Well, I'm thinking of the unique initiative of this FFE thing, and all the hoorah that accompanied the getting the thing approved, there was a lot of concern about transparency. And since we're plowing new ground here, I'm not entirely satisfied that going forward we might want to consider making disclosure of the all the disbursements a requirement for funding. I'm not going to second guess anything that's gone on so far, because I think what has happened so far is all done with good intent. But we do have a chance to review it now, and we do have a chance as a board to come to a policy decision about the way to proceed going forward. So I'm just putting that out there for maybe not total discussion today, but something to bring up at our next meeting for some kind of proposal on this matter. I would like to see that, I think, or be talked out of it.
I like to see it as well, and at least have further discussion and more dialogue. Steve, obviously we need more information for us to make any type of decision with any level of authority or familiarity with some of us. Is there something that we could add to the agenda and have someone come and present the pros and cons?
I believe so. And also, I think it'd be good to hear from a business owner from that perspective as well as pros and cons piece of it. I just want to make sure we're broadly encompassing this conversation. It's my understanding, and correct me if I'm wrong, Attorney Robinson, that when asking demographic information of sex, gender, and race and ethnicity and gender, one has to offer the option to not answer. Is that correct?
I'd have to do some legal research into that, but that is not uncommon to see, that if you choose not to provide that information, there's oftentimes an opt-out.
Yeah, and I know that Chris, we had talked about this, and in the demographic reporting, I think it's up on screen now, you'll see the two areas. Again, people made the determination for themselves that it was that they would prefer not to answer. So that may all go part and parcel, Madam President, of understanding where we're compelling answers to of participants. It would certainly, if we're going down a procedure kind of policy route, we'd want to make sure that we at least created those areas of discussion, even if they were all just taken kind of addressed over a series of years or a series of
Sure, I agree. Duly noted. Yeah, I think.
Madam President, if I could get some clarification, I guess from Director Urban, are we talking about any FFE dollars, or it being solely an FFE program? So in other words, if FFE gave, or granted 300,000 to a $2 million program, are we talking disclosure there, or if it were just a $2 million FFE program?
Well, I was thinking the former. I want to be pretty inclusive here, so we don't blunder into something that we later on wish we had had thorough understanding of. So I don't know where this discussion is going to end up, but I don't want to foreclose any part of it right now.
Madam President?
Yes.
Just a quick question for the attorney again. If I know the city has a loan program, are those names disclosed? So through community planning and development, there's a loan program, business loan program. Are those names public on the public record?
I do not know for sure, since I'd have to probably talk with Antonio Mitchell as to how much of that is publicized. So I don't know off the top of my head.
Okay. Yeah, if we're going to do a report and just try to dive into this, it would be interesting to know our present practice as a city. I know we are not the city. I understand that. But what is our present practice, and what is our why for doing that? Mm-hmm. And that can help, along with other things, as a foundation if we want to dive deeper into this. I trust you guys. I trust those that are on this board and the work that we're doing. No one's trying to put anything beyond anyone's site. But if there's a way to understand what our practices have been in this community and where we'd like them to be, I think it's worth diving into. This is a unique opportunity that we made available to folks. We talked about that a little bit. President Sargent, you talked about it. This has been a unique time, a unique opportunity. What are our learnings? What are the blessings of failure that we've had? What are the things that we can take away and tweak, improve, and quality improve as we move forward? So thank you, Madam President.
Thank you. And thank you for all who've voiced your opinions. I think if nothing else, we do need to take a closer look and have further discussion in the future. It's enough of us who feel strongly about it that we just need to, again, take a look, as a former mayor said, at current policies within the city and establish some baseline knowledge for us so we can make a more informed decision in the future. So thank you all for that. Anyone else? Okay, I do have a question, comment really, but particularly a question regarding the demographics. Could we go back to the pie charts for the United Way slide, please, Steve?
Yes, let's see.
Thank you.
This is the Small Business Loan Fund. Is that the correct slide?
Yes. So first, again, I would also like to thank Mr. Sargent for taking time out of his schedule to be with us today and answer our questions and just elaborate on some of the findings. It seems to me, as I'm looking here, that 6.4% of Black or African Americans were able to access this fund, as well as 2.2% of Hispanic and 2.6% looks like of Middle Eastern, and Asian 4.2%. And I'm really disappointed in the lack of representation ethnically in what was distributed and disseminated in this community. And so my question is, why, if we know, why were these numbers so low? Is it a lack of access? Was it a lack of penetration? I just need more information about that, because I know that there are many small businesses led by people of color. I myself am a business owner, though I didn't try to access these funds. And I know a lot of business owners. We're a pretty robust community. And when I see that 70.5% of those who received funds were white, and we've had so much conversation about equity and racial disparities, and I'm flabbergasted. So I would just want to hear more about that, Mr. Sargent, if you could. And also, I feel like we need a tentative plan. And that's not necessarily for any of us to answer today, unless anyone has thoughts on the matter, but how we can improve these statistics or lack of access, or whatever we want to call it, moving forward.
Yeah, great question. Thank you, Dr. Graham. Couple of things I would highlight, because I agree with you when you look at single digit percentages, knowing that the business ownership is greater than that. The one pie chart that, this might be a case of where the prefer not to answer is not always ideal, because you'll see 14% prefer not to answer. And I will tell you that aligned to some of the businesses that also didn't want to be listed, and those were predominantly owned by BIPOC individuals. So, but I want to be careful, because while I may know some of that as background, publicly, we did not share that because they asked us not to. So that might be one of the downsides of creating, not being listed information. But at the same time, so over 70% of the businesses who received support were white-owned businesses. I think a couple of things were factors in there, and this is not all inclusive. But one thing that we consistently heard was some of our BIPOC businesses were not looking to add debt to their businesses. And one of the responses based on that, or some of the feedback that we got, really pushed us, in partnership with the city of Kalamazoo and the Consumers Energy Foundation money, was to do the grant program, the $5,000 grants. because we knew that there were a number of businesses that were not looking to take on additional debt based on the uncertainty of this time for COVID. So that was one. I think the other thing, quite honestly, is while we have some connection to networks, we are not completely well connected as a community in terms of networks. So, I identified some that we partnered with both on social media and in community at a community-based level. But to be fair, United Way has a long ways to go if we own our own role in this for being a more equitable and inclusive organization. So I can talk about what we've been doing intentionally over the last 5+ years, but that doesn't mean that necessarily everybody's going to come to United Way for a program like this or other organizations that might be viewed as less than inclusive or connected into the community. So I think from a continuous improvement perspective, there is always those relationships and opportunities to expand there. And we both acknowledge and own our role in that. So while we feel we are connected at some level, there's a greater opportunity to be more connected to all of the businesses in the community. And then the final piece that I would offer is we have felt that these statistics did not fully represent the business community as a whole, especially the BIPOC-owned businesses. And so therefore, in terms of the 2021 plan that we're talking with the city of Kalamazoo about, I mentioned earlier about kind of the overall assessment of small business. We want to better understand both the landscape of small businesses, the connection to small businesses, but also the needs of small businesses. And not assume just because there's loan dollars out there, even at low interest rates, that people would benefit from them. And better understand, in addition to even grant resources like the Microenterprise Grant Program, what other additional resources could be helpful, and where there may be resources that people either don't feel comfortable or don't feel fully represent them. So there's a lot of partners in the space, from the Small Business Development Center and Downtown Kalamazoo Partnership and Southwest Michigan First and LISC and organizations like that. But I think we need to continue to get feedback and understand how business owners really see them as supports or not.
If I can echo
Yes,
what you're saying,
please.
Chris, is two pieces that go with this as well. And one of them is they tie into the work directly that's happening, is looking for statistics. So there's the Minority Small Business Administration, which operates at the federal level, and their numbers for the state of Michigan are, I think, over 10 years old. And I believe that number was at 7% were minority-owned businesses in the state of Michigan. So having better numbers that are up to date really does that's probably one of the most crucial things that we're missing, because if you've got a goal, what's the goal? What's the reality of business ownership that we're trying to serve? And we just don't have that information yet, but I think we're working toward it, as Chris just mentioned, by getting some requests and surveys out in the community. The other was that Antonio Mitchell, who I think we can definitely talk to a little bit more in the future, had mentioned at our previous meeting that we're, as a foundation, we serve only businesses in the city of Kalamazoo. And so what's interesting is that Antonio's coming up to a lot of minority-owned businesses that the owner may live in the city, but the business is located outside of the city. So how do we look in partnership with other organizations? Because our tools don't extend that far, right? So our tools are in that sense not really applicable. So there's that city, county, city, neighboring community challenge there as well, which like so many of the things we've been doing, may come to be solved in partnership with other organizations and entities that have a different reach or a different capacity than we do. But absolutely agree that we're at the beginning of this work, and that there's more serious questions to be asked about how we serve the community better.
I certainly understand the predicament that we're in, and that all of the partnering organizations are in, and the need for research and data and numbers. My issue is very personal and emotional, because it's what typically happens in cases like this is that when we are gathering data and research in numbers, still 71 almost % of dollars are going to the white community or white businesses, and then these businesses of color are continually being left behind. And I just want to say to everyone on the board that certainly not all of the dollars come from FFE. I understand that, but I don't want to do anything that's going to create more disparity. And I just think we need to be really cognizant of that and really take a close look at these numbers and be really proactive about our plans going forward. Because what happened with this first cycle, to me, is that potentially is what it seems like has happened. So just wanted to put those words out there.
Yeah.
And I'll move on from it.
Sorry, Dr. Graham, if I could add one more thing, and I hope I'm not overly disclosing, but to your point, I think from our team's perspective, while there were some positives that came out of this in our partnership, there is definitely more intentional work to be done. And so, and I hope that I'm not over disclosing, but we have shared a proposal with the city of Kalamazoo moving forward that would also look at the partners that we would work with in communities, compensated partners in communities, to be able to help share information, to be able to help guide and support BIPOC. I keep saying BIPOC. I assume everybody recognizes I probably should have said Black, Indigenous, people of color owned organizations for clarity in case somebody didn't. That we would look for compensated partners in community to help grow and expand the support and the resources and the availability, because we see this as a fundamental issue that's not new to this program or this year, but as part of systems of racist structures that perpetuate these inequities. So while I'm not the foremost expert on any of what I'm talking about, we do recognize as an organization that that's part of the continuous intentional work that has to be done moving forward, that we feel we could offer and bring to the table in terms of improving upon this work.
Thank you. Thank you very much for that.
You're welcome.
Steve, back to you.
Oh, I was muted. I apologize. Well, now I have a second chance to say it better. Is that you weren't premature at all. I was just reminded by Deputy City Manager Lamb that the consultants contracts were approved at the last commission meeting to begin that work. So it is underway, and the commissioners who are here on this call will remember from the last meeting that was approved. So, Madam President, back to the agenda. So Chris, thank you very much for your time. And
yes,
again,
thank you.
You're very welcome to stay on board, but I appreciate that you are probably very busy on this Monday. So
yeah, thanks again for the partnership. I'm actually getting ready to transition to the United Way CEO Summit. For any of you that are interested in participating, we're actually talking about inclusive leadership in community. So a good topic for those of you who want to join us at 4 o'clock on virtual environment. So thanks again for the partnership and having me on today. Have a great rest of your meeting.
Thank you. Looks like we are up to Finance Committee reports. Is that where we left off, Steve?
We almost. We have just a few more slides here on the presentation.
Oh, my apologies. I thought you wanted me to return to the agenda.
We've covered so much, I know. Just a few more to highlight is, again, we'll do affordable housing presentation and landscape discussion at the next meeting, but a few that were exciting to mention now, which is new work this year and continuing work from last year. One is clearing the clouded titles. And this was a very kind of unique gap opportunity we identified with the county. And the basic background on this is that you could have a family that did not create a will. So that home, which was owned, and from what we're seeing, owned almost entirely outright. There's really no mortgages on these homes, owned by the person passed away. And then there's subsequent generations or even second generations living there and they don't actually legally own the home. It's not anyone's asset in point of fact. So to have federal assistance for a roof or any kind of equity in the home, it's simply legally not possible because the person who owns the home is deceased and there was never any establishment of succession. So the opportunity that we saw was to essentially offer probate to some of these families, and these were identified through the kind of financial counseling services that already exist at the county level with the county treasurer. We were able in this first pilot year to work with 8 homes, so 8 families in core neighborhoods. So North Side, East Side, Edison. I believe one home was in the South Side. And so it was a $4,400 investment of FFE dollars to an attorney. And the homes that were probated and brought into ownership, rightful ownership, by the successive generations have a fair market value right now of $334,000. So this is an interesting, it seems small, but it's actually really quite an interesting way of adding a tool to the idea of wealth creation in communities where it's definitely needed and aligned with our work of eliminating generational poverty. So we have a goal of 10 homes per year. We just actually got word from the county that we did the other 2, so to make 10 this year in September. And then that can be probably scaled or adjusted depending on the need that we see. There's also conversations about the education or information that can be put out for and potential resources and partnerships that can be undertaken to just make sure that people are creating wills and kind of chains of title, chains of ownership for their fixed assets to make sure that the wealth that exists is kept within families, within community. So that's an exciting program from this year. And that builds on the relationship with that was built with the county for, are you seeing the right slide? I'm sorry, is this zero tax foreclosure? Is that what you're able to see? Okay. And we are now, since 2018, we've been partnering with the county to help address tax foreclosure issues that come up for those most in need and then most likely to succeed based on a positive history of tax payment. And these are basically exclusively people in severe medical emergencies, seniors who have fixed income or relied on a family member that can no longer assist them. Also, there's often kind of a movement out of justice system. And so you have people who are entering or they're in the process of tax foreclosure. And what we see there is an opportunity to invest in community, invest in families staying in their homes, and invest in the fabric of a neighborhood. And so what we saw in 2020 was 43 homeowners compared to 32 in 2019. So those are 43 people, often seniors, who are in their homes, often they're multi-generational households as well, because of FFE's investment. And this program started at $40,000 and it has a maximum of $80,000 per year, but I believe that this program this past year cost about $65,000. So the return on investment is, I don't want to say incalculable, but it's one of these programs that's so basic, keeping families in their homes, that it has such a knock-on effect on just keeping people in their homes and the things that don't have to happen. People aren't going into that terrible situation of an eviction or kind of just the tearing of the fabric of their family. So those are 2 interesting programs. Again, you're seeing an example of we're building a relationship, in this case with the county, identifying an opportunity, doing a pilot, following that through in multiple years, and then in that process also seeing other opportunities that really nobody else saw. There's 2 things to highlight here is that we have zero tax foreclosures for the 3rd year, and that's unprecedented. That's not happening anywhere else in Michigan in any community of any size. And the clouded titles, there's a kind of exploratory project done, as I understand it, in Macomb County, but otherwise nobody else is doing that. So these are innovations in Kalamazoo, unique to Kalamazoo, that we would happily call projects that others could model off of us. So I'll advance the slide here into youth, and I will keep my eye on the clock. I see that we're doing pretty well at 3:20. Let's see here. So youth summer programs, this was covered partially earlier when I mentioned the Digital Access for All and the Learning Hubs model. So what I just want to highlight here is that Parks and Recreation responded well by fulfilling the 50% target that they were held to because of social distancing requirements to COVID. I was actually able to see and volunteer in the arts component of All Things Possible this summer at Mears Riverfront and then at LaCrone Park. And these were, this was high quality, responsibly conducted summer learning. I was able to see Meg Blinkevich there from KidNet. They continue to be the social emotional learning consultant and advisor and responsible for producing the metrics and the measurements for our programs each year. So very difficult situation, which was shared as well by My City. If you remember the spring page, Farrell, believe now Daniels is her last name, presented their plan for My City over the summer. And something to highlight here was that they did go all virtual, but they were able in the end to do some career pathway summer internships on site. Those were in areas of, let's see here, early childhood, construction trades, certified nursing aid. So they were able to, in the end, make sure that they got some in-person experience. That was $173,000 in wages were paid out to 178 participants. So that's, certainly real resources making their way to young people. And that was determined by averaging out previous years of on-site earnings. And these individuals were, for the most part, it was conducted remotely, and they were doing education on job seeking, resumes, positive interviews, area expertise in the areas that they were interested in through KRESA's EDGE system. So you'll see there at the bottom as well, 1.5 million in wages since 2017. So even in the face of the adversity of COVID, we adapted with partners and moved ahead. And hopefully we'll have some of these stories to tell in the newsletter this November. There's certainly some testimonials that we're trying to gather for just what this, what the experience was like for people. Youth Mobility Fund is another example, really a key example of how do you respond when the transportation system was briefly shut down, or for a time shut down, and then for many, many months was changed to be itself a fare-free system where it was only rear boarding. And so for those who don't know, Metro, until the end of actually September still, the drivers petitioned for, based on health guidelines, people can only board buses through the rear door, and it's a fare-free system. They're not collecting fares from anyone. At the end of that date, when it turns back to being a fare system, and I understand that date is, I'm sure, flexible based on guidelines from the state as well as federal level where necessary. At that point, this year's Youth Mobility Fund program will really kick in. That's our target for having the IDs distributed through KPS, and to keep the program going into its second year, so we keep learning, keep building the partnership with now involving KidNet, Kalamazoo Youth Development Network, for delivering fare-free unlimited transit to KPS high schoolers. And the most recent numbers, we have approximately 150,000 plus fare-free rides taken advantage of by KPS high school learners. And again, in the 2020-2021 school year, the focus is, of course, number one focus is on safety, just making sure that we're able to deliver that in partnership with Metro in a way that makes sense in this continued COVID environment. And then looking as the trimesters develop through winter and into spring, as hopefully social distancing requirements are loosened as possible, that we can continue growing the program and get back to some sense of normalcy toward the end of the school year. So That's it's again been a difficult process of adapting, but it happened because of the partners involved and because of the commitment to the partnership. So stepping forward to one last slide is what we'll see again at the next meeting. So these are just kind of reports and development. Look forward is affordable housing, as I've mentioned, sidewalks, tree planting, the great neighborhoods work. Of course, the building season with COVID, so many things were delayed or extended this year. So those will be reported in October. Neighborhood activation and engagement will come with that as well. And then the water service replacements and energy audit updates. And then an update on the newsletter is because of course, COVID, and then with the presidential election and all that means for potentially the post service, even on the most basic level of, everyone receiving tons of junk mail. We've shifted the newsletter to November so that we can A, capture all the work that's been done and all the stories behind it, but B, make sure that it lands in people's mailboxes and that they've got the capacity to see it and read it and know that it's there. So just a couple notes there. And then while I'm here, I'll jump as well to the budget timeline as just a reminder to where we are. Anyone who would like to take note, these are the public meetings ahead of us for the budget. So August 31st started us with the committee meetings, and September and October are going to fly by, I assure you, and we will see you again on October 12th. But with this, Madam President, I'll jump back to the agenda, and we can keep going there. So that was item C1, just a presentation, no action required at all. And on to C2. So I can scroll through the agenda, but I just want to make sure quickly that CFO Vicenzi is on, has his camera and his microphone on.
Yep, I'm here.
Wonderful. So Steve, I will scroll down to the endowment report, and if you bear with me, you can present from there. Okay, can you see that all right? And is it legible?
Small.
Okay, let me do this.
There we go. All right, so I guess this being the first time presenting this to this committee or to the board, just kind of want to walk through the endowment report that's given to the finance committee. As we move forward, we may, shrink this or change it depending on the needs of this board, but we felt it important this time to kind of walk through step by step of what's being reported on the endowment from the investment subcommittee. So just here we kind of have the overview page, kind of describes what happened over the past quarter. So for us, quite a bit happened. We were able to sell the donation that we received of stock and get that reinvested into an investment strategy, which is split between right now 50% equities and 50% of a bond fund. And you can kind of see there, just kind of summarizing all the detail there, going to the last line. We used May 1st as our measurement date because we were invested right at the end of April. So just kind of rounding to May 1st. We were able to return 10.22% adjusted for inflation for the quarter. So obviously everyone knows what's happened this year with COVID in the stock market. Huge dip in the first quarter, big comeback in the second quarter. So we were able to kind of reap some of that benefit in the second quarter there and end the quarter with $85.5 million. Whenever I do report, I do like to kind of give a look forward, especially when it's good news. Like good news so far has continued. We'll see where it goes toward the end of the year with all the uncertainty between the current state of COVID and the election and everything. But as of today, when I ran reports, we were at about $91 million. So that, positive investment news continued so far in the third quarter. But sticking to the report here, so that's just basically what this page is a nice summary. I don't want to go over through every single line here. So we can just kind of go to you're on the next page. I'm sorry. So Steve flipped over to the portfolio exposure. And that just kind of highlights what we're invested in, kind of shows our, what's invested in the US, what's invested in foreign dollars or foreign countries. The fact that we're split between equity and fixed income and what our targets are at 50% of each. Obviously, as the quarter went on, each of those investments grew at a different rate. And you kind of see that we're still close to policy. Our goal is to end within about 5% of that policy target each quarter. And if we start to get outside of that 5% is when we start looking to reallocate. And what that means is we would potentially sell some of the equity fund and move it into the bond fund in a quarter like this to try to get it back closer to that 50-50 ratio. What this page also shows you is kind of the breakdown of the Jennison fund. Kind of shows what it's made up from and what it's invested in. So just kind of looking at the sector allocation, you can see where they're invested, like 16% of the fund is in treasuries. There one interesting note on this I would like to bring up is, you can see where the benchmark in the next column is at 37%. So that's quite a bit of a deviation and something that we kind of look into, because these funds have been picked based on their allocations and how they're expected to behave. And so when you see a deviation, we do like to look into that and kind of delve into why and whether the fund is still acting as expected or if it's starting to act as a different type of fund. So we did kind of look back. It seems to be a choice by Jennison to get away from treasuries over the past 2 years. 2 years ago, they were much higher in their treasury percentage. And just kind of looking at what's happened in the treasury market, you've seen interest rates plummet in that market. So it does make sense. There is some discussion on that in the investment subcommittee. Not too much alarm at this point because, at this point we can kind of make sense of why they would make such a move away from treasuries. But at the end of the day, we want them to we want this fund to perform in a certain way and make sure that we're staying true to why we're invested in this fund. And overall it is, you can kind of see, kind of go through the rest of what it's invested in here between different types of, I would say, safe assets for the most part. And so that's just kind of a breakdown of what we show here. We go to the next page. Just another breakdown. Some of these charts aren't too impressive yet as we only have 2 funds. Just kind of shows another way of where the fund percentage compared to the policy. So you can kind of see the slight deviations that we're at, but we're not over that 5%. So we're in good shape for where we want to be and have no real need to reallocate at this time. Just continuing on. This next page, this just shows the returns of the funds over time. Right now, again, kind of a short report because there's only been a couple of months. As time goes on, this will show the 1 year, 3 year, 5 year, and most recent quarter, and even go on back to inception. So 20 years down the road, you'll see this go all the way through the steps, all the way back to the inception, and just kind of see how these funds are performing, and especially over time and at given different times. So this chart over time will become more interesting, but just kind of gives you an idea where we are right now. And then continuing on. And then this is kind of a similar chart, shows the return as compared to a benchmark fund that you like to compare yourselves to find out, are we doing better or worse than the benchmarks? Based on the benchmarks we've selected here, we're pretty much right on target, maybe a little bit better. One note I'll make is in the BlackRock fund, that fund is meant to mimic the S&P 500. So we'll note in May that there is a significant outperformance of the benchmark, which is not typical. Should pretty much be a 1-for-1. The difference was when we invested with BlackRock, there's a slight delay in getting bought into the fund. And so we had actually bought into the fund on May 6th. And simply because of those 5 days in May, those were the 5 worst days of the month for the S&P. And so we were able to kind of get lucky and buy at a low. Obviously not really our intention to try to time the market, but that's just the way it worked out. And so you'll see good outperformance for us there. And then you can kind of see in June where it matches the 1.99% return of the S&P 500. And that's what we would expect for that type of a fund. Then continuing on, I believe we're on, oh, not quite the last page. Next page, kind of similar information, just over time versus the benchmarks. Nothing too detailed to get into there that we haven't kind of covered in one way or another. And then the last page, just kind of skipping there, just kind of is a nice summary of what each fund is and what it's meant to do. So kind of puts in a little bit more understandable terms of what each fund that we're working with does. So that's kind of a high level overview of everything that's in this report. I guess at this point, I'd like to open it up if anyone has questions or would like me to go into anything in a little more detail.
Doesn't seem to be any.
All right.
Thank you so much, Mr. Vigenzi, for your time and your review of your report.
Thank you.
So now we
And I can
move on.
continue the Finance Committee presentation
Thank
with the draft budget. And we'll look at it in two ways. The first is as the table that shows, as it has in past in the transmittal memo, the line item elements of the budget. And then we'll skip through some of the descriptions of the projects. The transmittal memo is what's in the board packet. So again, this is what you have and what's available in the agenda on the city's website. And then this is the document that makes its way through this process that we've discussed. So it'll be changed if necessary, but at any rate presented then for review by the commission, brought back to the board, and then adopted and really printed in this form in the city's budget once adopted. So I'll scroll down to it here. So what you see is a top level page, which is just an introduction in the transmittal memo format, describing the overall grant to the city, as well as the funds that contributes to. This information is a little bit easier to see on the next page. So I'll go ahead and jump here and then make this a full screen, which hopefully is a little bit easier for everyone. Is that legible? I don't want to continue if people are squinting at it. Is that okay? Okay, thank you. So we'll see a couple things that I would like to highlight here. One is that we're now in we're budgeting for 2021. This started in 2017. So in that left column of life to date funding, 2017 to 2020, you can really see where the investments have gone. And then you can see at the very bottom of the total with $95 million budgeted, that moving into this next year, we're going to cross a milestone that really, we hadn't considered as such. And I don't know that it's crossed any of the directors, any of your minds either, is that we will be budgeting our $100 millionth dollar that has gone to stabilize the city's budget, to create an unprecedented level of predictability and stability at the city, to do the Imagine Kalamazoo strategic vision work, which otherwise would not have been possible, certainly in the way that it is with the foundation, to lower taxes for city taxpayers, to really make home ownership easier, and to hopefully make it a more competitive community for residents and for businesses in context of our surrounding municipalities, which all have lower tax bases than we do. And then for the aspirational programs, which really are oftentimes justifiably so the main focus of the work of the foundation, because they're making otherwise impossible programs possible through the city and also in partnership. So we'll see what we have this year is the budget stabilization, and I'll touch on the metric and method behind this on the next page, but a total of $17 million, $17.2 million in those two areas. And then $8.5 million of aspirational projects, which is similar to last year. And really it's on average, we're pretty much similar so far since 2017, for a total of $25.78 million. Now, some areas to highlight in the aspirational are continuation of the lead service replacement. This is work that is continuing year after year, absolutely necessary infrastructure work. We're contributing to other grant dollars that have been brought in by public services to get us to be a lead-free drinking water system as quickly as possible. Infrastructure, a large investment in infrastructure again this year in the areas of really quality of life, built environment aspects, so sidewalks, trees, tree trimming, a small piece for parks, park enhancements for the youth development center. And for neighborhood activation engagement, this continues support for creating neighborhood plans and work projects that come out of the existing plans that have been approved at the city commission level, which I believe now numbers 7. So those are the core neighborhoods that they've moved through as a priority in community planning and economic development. Summer youth programs, you'll see the My City partnership with Kalamazoo Regional Education Services, which produces My City, All Things Possible, Super Rec. The Youth Mobility Fund is funded. That's a fund model because the elasticity of demand, we pre-funded what we anticipated for several years of operation. So that's currently not requiring any additional resources. The Digital Access for All, in order to create stability for next school year, we are recommending a $100,000 grant to keep that project going. Economic vitality, and again, I'll scroll down and we can go through the detailed descriptions, but a major investment in economic development and major investment in affordable housing. Two things to note here at this toward the bottom of the page is that the home energy efficiency pilot, which was begun last year, which intends to assess houses in core neighborhoods for energy efficiency, and then to also to have a minority contractor component to do the work itself in those homes, was a successful pilot. And so they are moving into some work in this next year on the homes themselves. And you'll notice FFE projected expenses, which I'll touch on at the very end of the document. That line is as intended, is being moved from this grant activity to being paid directly from the endowment now that the endowment is up and running as of earlier this year. So those direct expenses to the foundation itself are being paid directly from the foundation's assets for the first time. So I will try to move slowly through here. I apologize. I know scrolling is not can make people a little motion sick. So, so what we see here is the tax reduction. This is calculated as a percentage of the taxable value. So that's a fixed formula that's conducted every year by the city treasurer. And that's how we arrive at the just over $13 million grant to the city for that. Likewise, budget stabilization, that's a number that comes by adding an inflation factor to the very first grant, which was approximately $4 million back at the beginning in 2017. And so you can see the history there of it slowly increasing from 3.8 to 4 to 4.12 and now to $4.23 million. And that money is the budget stabilization that goes directly to the city's general fund to make really the background spine of the city's capacity what it needs to be to conduct the work of Imagine Kalamazoo and certainly support the work that we talk about as aspirational projects. And keeping in mind that we'll do further presentations in October and that board members may want to continually do some reading on these areas that we're proposing for funding. I will jump to the next page. We did a little bit of a deeper dive on youth development because we wanted to report on COVID impacts and get some numbers in there. So those are a little bit more detailed reports. Economic vitality and affordable housing. Again, affordable housing will be elaborated and then in October presented in depth. And to the last page here, which I mentioned, Appendix B, expenses directly incurred by the foundation for its operations. And these are actually lower than last year's numbers. Last year's numbers were projections. They were the first times that we had incurred those costs. So they were estimates for things like liability insurance for directors and officers. And so this year we have more accurate estimates of those numbers. So those numbers are a little bit lower. And then as a total cost, they are to be paid directly from cash at the endowment level. So they don't actually ever come as a grant to the city. And then the very last item, which is changes by quarter, and we, are part of our reporting, but are estimated here, is the expenses that just the carrying costs for investing such a large sum of money. As we take in more contributions to the endowment and the endowment grows, these numbers will change as we work with different managers to invest that money. And even as a static amount of money, I think market conditions can change the amount of activity that's required for those dollars to be managed responsibly and with hopefully a positive net position. So those are estimates there, and then the real numbers are reported on as the activity transpires throughout the year. So I will scroll back up again, hoping not to make anybody motion sick, and pause here on the first page if anyone has any questions or comments at this time.
I am curious about expungement clinics. Have they still been happening since March, or is that?
Good question, Director Lomberg. Thank you. They are on pause. We have a bi-monthly meeting with Deputy City Attorney Rich Cherry. I'm not sure if he's actually presented to the board before or if any of you know him, but he's really lead on the project as city staff. And we meet with the county prosecutor's office and judges to try to plan the meetings. And it was determined that it hasn't been possible to bring people together in public. It's an active program. We're eager to get our next one going. And I know that Rich and Attorney Robinson, I'm not sure if you've talked to Rich much about this, but there's questions of how much, if any of this could be done remotely. The answer is it can't be done remotely, but could some prep work be done? So we're still doing learning on that, but we're eager as soon as possible to get it up and running. It's just a matter of, the way that it works is that you have a lot of bodies in close contact waiting in line for a very long time, and then at computers working closely next, kind of shoulder to shoulder. So finding a space that's large enough to do that has also been a challenge. But now that we see, I think a part of this is now that we see really what we're dealing with, and that this is just going to continue, potentially for another 6 months, 8 months, that we're going to have to invest in finding something to adapt, because otherwise everything just continues to be pushed till an unknown date in the future, which is certainly not ideal. Okay. Madam President, I believe you're muted. It was your turn to be muted. I got one last time.
So is that the conclusion of your report, Steve? I better ask that this time.
Yes, madam.
All right. Thank you so much for your careful review and explanation. And seeing that there are no questions, we are needing a motion to adopt adopt.
No motion requested at this time for the draft budget. You can approve the overall Finance Committee report. Yeah.
Okay, so I am looking for a motion to approve the Finance Committee report as presented.
So moved.
Thank you, Director Dennison.
I saw a hand from Director Lomberg. I don't know if she was.
Oh, I was just scratching my face.
Okay, so we do have a motion to approve. Is anybody
Support.
prepared to second or support?
Support.
Thank you, Director Washington. Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor of approving the Finance Committee report, say aye.
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 Any opposed?
Aye.
Motion carries. Thank you all. Executive Committee reports, Steve.
Well, Madam President, I believe that we, in effect, covered this with Dorla, Director Bonner's presentation at the beginning. And that discussion got into the future work of DEI with the board. And that's what had been discussed at executive committee meeting. So there's, certainly space to continue that conversation if desired, but I think that we kind of really got to that under the staff reports portion of the agenda.
Yes, agreed. Regular agenda.
No items.
All right. Any public comments?
We have
So at
not
this-
received any public comments at this time.
Thank you. Go ahead, Steve.
I was gonna ask Joe if there were public comments, but he has gotten so incredibly good at public comment management for City Commission that he was right there waiting. So shout out to the Information Technology Department at the City of Kalamazoo for all the support that goes into these many commission and board meetings, which are, number in the dozens. So
Yeah.
another opportunity to say thank you.
Agreed. And thank you so much for all you do. Board member comments. Yes, Mayor, I had to scroll to see you.
Thank you so much for the chance. I first want to say I appreciate all the great work that Steve Brown is doing here. That's very, very helpful. And I just wanted to actually have half a dozen things I'm just going to clip through. I just wanted to let everybody know, particularly Chair Graham Williams, that similar concerns were expressed. Members of the commission have seen some of this information before relative to grants and business loans. So I think the commission and this group are on the same page because there were definitely a consistent set of concerns which completely reflected your concerns as well, which is already, as you heard, beginning to drive some reevaluation of this, from our partners, United Way and that kind of thing. So I just want to make sure that you do not feel that you are in any way alone in expressing those concerns. So thank you for that. I also just want to touch on that when we're talking about this disaster relief funding that we talked about, that two fantastic things came out of having those resources available. One is there has never been more provider cooperation on the homeless services side of things across provider agencies. I think just having some resources for people to work on together drove a much heightened kind of cooperation, and which I think is going to build for better outcomes in the future. So that has been great. And also, without this funding available immediately in more short order, we would have no way been able to do the kinds of things we did. For example, like master leasing motel space, which I think did a fantastic job to reduce the opportunity for COVID transmission in our congregate shelters if we had been waiting for other resources. I had the opportunity to meet with Director of HUD, Dr. Carson, on August 17th. And one of the things we mentioned to him at that meeting was that hundreds of thousands of dollars got spent for our local response and relief efforts. And as of that moment, we had still not gotten any reimbursement from HUD dollars, MSHDA dollars that were supposed to coming our way. And so we had really spent all of that on our own dime, including even individual nonprofit line of credit spending. And without that, we would not have been able to pull off what we pulled off. interesting thing was a day or two, I think it was the very next day after that meeting, we got a call from Mishta saying, oh, guess what? Oh, the check's in the mail. We're going to get it to you. I don't know if there's any connection with that. I tend to think there was, but without the disaster relief fund, it wouldn't have happened. And we finally now did get some of the money, which we're able to pay back some of those costs. So another thing that did help, I want to remind people that our continuum of care, which is related specifically to trying to pull, make a focus on services related to people who are without housing, now is housed at the United Way. I think the city is supporting that effort. That's going to be a more robust continuum of care than we have had in the past. Related to that, and I know that that Director of Open Doors, Hoffman, will maybe say more about this, but we do need to keep it in mind here that we are having a real opportunity here in the Kalamazoo County now, that the Public Housing Commission has gotten the proposal on the ballot to increase our millage contribution here, which is going to be, I would say, once again, not only, we got the Foundation for Excellence, but this idea of multiplying our current resources specifically to affordable housing by 7.5, turning that into a $6.2 million a year program in Kalamazoo County is going to be critical. So please do two things. Share with family and friends how important voting yes for this will be in November, and go to the website. The effort, the campaign to get that news out there needs funding also. And so right now there is the opportunity to contribute to that campaign. It's not tax deductible, but to help promote a positive view and a positive vote for that millage. I also, my next item is that I'm the liaison to what's called the RIC, which is that crew of volunteer individuals who help manage our endowments for the county, for the city, for our retirees and that kind of thing, who have now taken on this responsibility. It was recommended to us from our own finance committee that we use that board to manage our endowment money. So I get to participate in those discussions, a great dedicated group of Kalamazoo people that are really expending their good time and efforts and intellect into making sure that they are carefully manage these endowments to do the good work. It's also, next item is that we're talking about $100 million here in a soon to be allocated, and it reminds me of a quote which we've heard before, but it's attributed to Senator Everett Dirksen years and years ago. As a senator who said, perhaps somewhat facetiously, but this idea that a billion here and a billion there. After a while, you start talking about a lot of money. I'm feeling like that with the FFE. I wanted to thank so much to Mayor Hopewell. Here we are, $1 million here and $1 million there. After a while, you start talking about a lot of money. We're up to, be allocated $100 million, but all the great work that happened, we would not having any of this discussion were it not for the fact that we do now have this construct, which we are all representing on the Foundation for Excellence. All this good work, all tied back to the resources here. So thank you, Mayor Hopewell. I appreciate that a great, great deal. And then I have one last thing, and I just wanted to talk about, we've got a draft budget, which we didn't have to take action on. And I don't want to throw any wrench into the works on that budget. But one thing that I would very much like to see that we need to focus on is some efforts related to our anti-violence initiatives, which we need, not only in an engagement side, but we need some resources put there. That is a serious, serious issue in the city of Kalamazoo. I'm sure everyone is noticed and concerned about the number of folks who've unfortunately died this year in Kalamazoo related to this activity that's occurring, the number of shootings, the number of people have been shot, it's time for us to seriously, not only pull forces together and folks that are doing all kinds of work in different areas, but related to addressing that issue and put some resources behind that as well. So this staff, I know we're talking about a draft budget here, but I'm hoping we can think in terms of, can we direct some resources very specifically? And I would say in the case of anti-violence work and the way we can provide hope and opportunity for folks and real help, not just talk, is that there's a group of people who primarily are male, who are either touched by, at risk of, or actively participating in some of these activities, which are, detrimental for the whole city, for their neighborhoods, for their families, and for themselves, that we need to provide some resource available there. So we can talk more about that, but that's just something I'd like to make sure is at the forefront of the work we're doing. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Anderson. Excuse me. Any other board member comments? Let me scroll through. If you're raising your hand, give me just a moment so I can scroll. Okay. Director Lomberg, yes.
Yes. Since our last gathering in this weird Zoom way that we gather, I've heard from a lot of folks, both in the faith community that I represent and in my neighborhood and elsewhere in the city, who have deep concerns about safety and how we care for each other and policing in our community. And I know that the FFE can't take action on things like mandating training or reallocating funds. Thank you, Steve, for helping me make sense of our bylaws. But I feel like I would be remiss if I did not speak up for the people who have the power to make those changes, to consider reimagining how we take care of one another in our community, because we are not rising to the challenge in this moment. I'm happy to talk more offline if anybody would like to, but I encourage us all to do better.
I wanted to ask the mayor.
Go ahead, Director Taylor. I apologize. I was muted by mistake.
Okay, can you hear me?
We can.
Okay, I have a question regarding, you mentioned the violence and trying to come up with some ideals and projects to try to decrease the violence that's taking place. And, I remember a few years back when the violence was at the center of attention in Kalamazoo, when thousands of dollars came to Kalamazoo and it went to Kalamazoo Department of Public Safety, and they started the bridging program, which still exists. And so I'm kind of wondering, with a program that already exists, in which thousands of dollars went into that program and still do exist, is there some kind of way to extend on that program? Or, because you have a program in place. So, when I think about what you're talking about, and a lot of the perpetrators are young. They're young men. And I know the bridging program, I think their age limit go up to age 21, something like that, 18, 21. Okay, so I was wondering if there could be any kind of connection with that program.
You're muted, Mayor.
I'm sorry.
Okay, we can hear you now. For a moment, we couldn't.
Oh, okay, sorry. So I think that, as you can imagine, some of the direct engagement in this time of COVID has been reduced. And I think in some ways we are experiencing the downside of that reduction. Independently, it's not, a lot of that was tied kind of loosely into GBI and all that kind of work. And I do think that we have an opportunity, once we can get together more, to really get back to that as well. But I don't think that's enough. There's some pieces of that fall obviously on an enforcement side or public safety relations side. But I think that we really need to reinforce the community side. And I guess that's just back to my comments here before, is that I feel like we need more resources in the community side of things. One thing that happens to me as mayor is I have a lot of people come to me, and I won't list all their names, but individual people kind of representing individual interests that are saying, well, I want to do this, or I want to do this, or I'd like to do that. And I think that it needs to be a comprehensive community response, which won't necessarily be led by, one church or one nonprofit or that sort of thing, but that we find a way to, some of us have to be concerned about this. How are we being funded? Or, we have to look out for our organization, but how we can cross those barriers and bring the community together and provide some resources to help folks so we can come together with a comprehensive community response side, which can then pair up with, the kind of work that we're supposed to be doing, either at public safety, some of that relationship building on that side as well. I don't know if that answers your question, but I'm thinking about
I agree with you 100% on that. I don't know. It seems to me like we've known this for years, but yet and still the money keep going outside of the community. Keep going outside to the community for people to come into the community and to tell them what they need or put it up on them. Okay. So I agree with what you're saying 100%. So if it actually take place this time, kudos, because there's been money made available for violence more than one time, but it hardly ever involved the community when it comes to planning and implementation. So I really hope it works out this time for real.
Thank you, Directors Taylor and Anderson. Any other board member comments? And forgive me all, I'm having to scroll to see you. Director Dennison.
I'm sorry, I just wanted some clarification. Mayor, you mentioned a draft budget. You're referring to the FTE budget or the City of Kalamazoo budget? I haven't seen a draft 2021 budget posted yet for the city.
It's not due until December 1st, Pastor Dennison, so we won't, that's really when the budget is due to us. I'm talking about FFE.
Okay, thank you. I just wanted to clarify that.
Yep.
Thank you. Still looking for board member comments. Director Ritzema? No? Okay.
Director Urban raised his hand, I'm seeing.
My apologies, Director Urban. Please proceed.
I just put my hand up. You don't have to apologize. We don't have to be so quick to apologize.
I'm just trying to toggle through to find you all. I can't get you up to appear all on the same screen.
Hey, Steve, can you stop sharing your screen? Then we can.
Oh, okay. Okay, there we go. Well, one of the things that I've been told is contributing to the problem of violence and retribution and so forth that's going on with the this summer is The jail population is being depressed due to COVID. That's a factor that the police have informed us about. And also there's the problem from the police perspective of very low bond being set for people being arrested. So they bond it out promptly and they're free to then continue what they were doing. Now, that gets into a big question about what criminal justice is supposed to be doing and how long should you keep somebody in prison who hasn't been, or even in jail in advance of a trial. So but it has been up until now a fairly effective technique from the police perspective to have some people be able to be arrested for use of firearms, maybe not actually injuring anybody, but a firearm offense, for example, being bonded at such a rate that they are in jail for a couple of weeks. During that time, tempers cool down and the desire for vengeance decreases. Now, how much of that is something that FFE can get involved in? I doubt seriously, because we're not prepared to deal with the justice system.
Right,
but,
right.
Something that did occur to me, this is just, I'd say, catalytic. Hopefully it'll produce other ideas, because I'm clearly not an expert in this. But suppose if it's a matter of just like laying low for a while, is it possible for FFE money or something like that to provide funding for someone to just go into hiding for a while? So they're out of their neighborhood, they're not being arrested, they're free to go, but it can be out of sight for a while. Some people may want to take advantage of that, as long as there's not a stigma connected with it. So that's just my idea. I think it needs a lot of refinement, a lot of other ideas that are probably much better. I'm just laying it out there to let you know what the police are having to deal with, which is new this year and hadn't been a problem in the past because of COVID.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, go ahead, Director Taylor.
Okay, I just want to say I am not, I don't want to give the impression that I am being a negative with what the Public Safety Department has done with the program. I think they've done the best that they could with what they got. In fact, I helped them, or you could say worked with them during this year with COVID. And they realized they can't cover everything. And it goes back again to planning and implementation. Don't invite me when you're in trouble to participate. Invite me in the beginning. In the beginning. This is what the community is saying. Don't come to me when you already have a plan. Involve me from day one, include my input, because see, since I live in the community, my perspective might be quite different than yours. Okay, so I'm just saying, you know, I think they've done a good job. I think that with what they had, you know, and I really enjoyed working with public safety. I worked with them throughout my whole career. I continue to want to work with them because all police are not bad. There's some really, really good people working on public safety. But I'm just saying, it's the system. It's the way it's set up. It's the way it's set up. So I'm just saying, we talk equality and we talk about, you know, coming together. We do have to talk about it. We do have to come together, you know, but some of the things I'm hearing is the things I've been hearing for my whole work career. And so I'm just anxious and ready to see action taken and to see, you know, get some of those grassroots people to the table, you know, and let's make it happen.
Well,
That's the only thing I'm saying.
Thank you, Director Taylor.
Thank you.
Any other board member comments? Yes, Director Hoffman.
Good afternoon, everybody. I would be remiss if I did not give a shout out to, well, I'm going to use the proper lingo, Commissioner Urban, Commissioner Hess, Mayor Anderson, Attorney Clyde Robinson, Laura, Ms. Dorla, everybody who worked so hard on the housing equity ordinance. I was in tears, I was crying, I was yelling, I was screaming, I was dancing last Tuesday evening once it was passed. And when we talk about systems change, it's very hard work to do. But this time, what if we use this housing equity work to look at our law enforcement and judicial system in the same way? And that actual ordinance, it really came from the people and was presented to the city. So there is a way that we can do that when it comes to criminal justice. And so thank you all so much for being courageous and just loving people out loud.
Thank you, Director Hoffman. Well put. Any others? Thank you all for gifting us with your time and your talent and your expertise. My thoughts and prayers are with you all, that you remain healthy and safe, and your families do as well. And I appreciate certainly staff and elected officials, as well as board of directors, all of us who come together. And what we discuss is very often difficult and emotional, but we do it with grace and respect and style. And it is my honor and privilege and pleasure to lead you all in this way. Thank you all for being here today. Can I have a motion for adjournment? Thank you, Mayor Anderson. Supported by Director Carroll. Thank you. Have a wonderful day. Stay healthy and safe, everyone. Take good care.
Thank you. You too. Bye-bye.